The story may offend sensitive listeners, viewers rather, including children. The 32-year-old woman who allegedly murdered her 4 children at Ngcobo in the Eastern Cape has been arrested. The woman from Tsalaba village in Ngcobo in the Eastern Cape allegedly bludgeoned her children to death with a hammer. It's alleged that the young mother says she wanted to make sure she doesn't leave her children behind when she dies. Now, the children were aged between 2 and 11 years. Residents from the village are still reeling in shock after the gruesome incidents which allegedly took place last night. More details to follow as police and forensic officials are still at the scene. Now, to discuss what leads mothers to kill their children, we're now joined via Zoom by child activist and writer Robyn Wolfson Vorster. Robyn, thank you so much for your time. I mean, as per the intro, you know, what possibly, and I mean, this is a very difficult question, of course, but what could drive a parent, and in this particular case, a woman, a mother, to kill her own children, and in the manner in which she did it?
Sure, Nati, this is such a sad story and it's such a difficult question to answer, as you mentioned. I think we need to look at multi-factors here. So as you also correctly said, this is a very unusual method of killing children from a mom. And this is obviously a developing story, so we will no doubt hear more from the police, and when they do forensics, we'll get more information about this case. But the initial comments seem to allude to her state of mind. And I think that's really important because although we can't speculate about this, we've got to ask, what would have led her to be so desperate that she felt that her only way out was potentially to take her own life, which seems to be what she was indicating when she said that she wanted to take them with her, and what led her to take her children with her. So I think although we could spend some time talking about perhaps mental health, possibly the use of substances, we could speak about all sorts of things like that. Maybe what's more instructive is to say, how many of our mothers out there are feeling so desperate and feeling like they're abandoned and they're not in any way being supported? Because although this is a very unusual crime in its brutality, it's not unusual for mothers to kill their children in this country. We know that a study that was done by the Medical Research Council based on statistics from 2009 indicated that for children under the age of 5, 71% of those children were actually killed by their mothers. And a lot of those are through unsafe abandonments. But the fact is we are looking at multi-faceted problems related to mothers feeling unsupported. They're not getting family support. They're not getting support from the father or the fathers. It would be interesting to know where those people are in this story. They're not necessarily getting psychological support. They're not getting support from social workers or from their communities. And what's really instructive in cases like this is we know that in rural areas, there are even fewer social workers than there are in urban areas. One statistic that was provided by the Department of Social Development was that for every one person, for every one social worker, there was 90,000 people that she was servicing in one particular area, rural area. So the question is, if she was in a place where this was telegraphed, where we could have, if we had known her, seen, oh, she was in the process of unraveling and maybe she was going to hurt her children, would anyone have been able to intervene? And the truth is that in many cases, those problems and those crises go unseen. And so it would get to the point where we have a tragedy where lives are lost. But if somebody had been there to intervene earlier, perhaps this wouldn't have happened.
And that's a problem. I mean, you know, you talk about just what the reality is on the ground. I'm just looking at the latest stats, you know, that said that 243 children were murdered between April and June, which is a 46% year-on-year increase, which is staggering. But Robyn, you know, child murders in South Africa are so violent that there are fears that, you know, violence has become normalized in our society.
Unfortunately, I think those are realities. They're not even fears anymore. And although I mentioned that there are many killings that are done by mothers, we also look at killings by people who are known to children. There are occasional stranger danger type stories, but in many cases, these are people who are integrally connected with that child's life, and they're trusted by those children. So, as you correctly mentioned, we're looking at statistics at the moment about potentially 3 or 4 children who are dying daily in this country, and many other children who are they're exposed to attempted homicide, child rape, assault, violence. For our children, it's an incredibly dangerous place to be living. And even those who are not necessarily being targeted themselves are seeing violence from other sources, violence against their mothers, their parents, their peers. So for our children, this is a desperate situation. And there are many factors that need to be engaged with by government. We need to be looking at strengthening families. We need to be looking at community interventions. And we also need to be looking at societal factors like poverty, like unemployment, overcrowding, other key issues like patriarchy that allow us to believe that our children are an extension of ourselves, and when we die, we can take them with us. So these are really complex problems that need to be looked at. And in fact, we need, as much as we need to engage with individual perpetrators, we need societal-wide solutions, and those need to come from the top downwards.
All right, Robyn, thank you so much for your time. Of course, a difficult conversation we are having this afternoon. That was a child activist and a writer, Robyn Wolfson Vorster, for us.